welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cineworks. My name is Chris.
My name is Justin.
And my name is Mike. In today's episode, we will be going over what's on our minds, followed by our review of Halloween.
Okay, so if you want to see what we're watching next, send in your thoughts, your questions for us. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can also email those thoughts and questions to casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And please don't forget to go to iTunes, give us a review, subscribe to the show. Let us know what you think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Constructive criticism always helps.
Yeah.
Preferably of the 5-star variety. But you know what?
Yeah.
Follow your heart.
Yeah, as many as possible.
Yeah.
Like if you're stuck between a 3 and a 4, just go 4.
Or 5.
Yeah, if you're stuck
And
between
then
3
just
and 4,
tell us
go
why
5.
you're stuck
That's
at a
probably
3.
better.
Yeah, and that's all you have to do is just feedback is the important issue here, and then go tell a friend.
And the subscribe button. That's also equally important.
Lots of stuff for you guys to do, lots of homework this week, rating us 5 stars, telling a friend, but we appreciate every little bit that you do for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. And with that, gentlemen, are we ready to move into what is on our minds?
I sure am.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, let's do it. Okay, so Chris, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I wanted to start off this week by saying I've never been a horror movie guy, and mainly I think it's because I've been watching bad horror movies is what I've come to realize this last year. And this last year I've discovered how horror movies can be so great. I watched It Follows, I watched The Witch, the amazing Hereditary came out this year. All horror movies that I really, really loved, and some other ones that we are going to talk about on today's show, too. But they all have one thing in common, and that's like this real fears and real trauma, things that are grounded in real emotion. And yeah, so that brings me to what I want to talk about, or what I watched this week, and that is The Haunting of Hill House. I wasn't going to watch this because it's a horror TV show, and those usually don't appeal to me.
Yeah, me neither. Like American Horror Story?
Right,
No
right,
thanks.
exactly. And I think I even watched like half of American Horror Story, but I didn't like it. But actually, Jerry...
I've watched one season of American Horror Story.
The first one?
I
And it
watched
was okay.
the trailers for American Horror Story
And stopped.
and
I watched
realized this is not for me.
I watched the 4th season of it, I think.
Which one was that one?
That was the Roanoke one.
Oh, okay. Oh, the
I've always
found
been
footage
into
one?
Roanoke, and yeah, I thought that whole like Roanoke story was very interesting, and so I was intrigued enough to watch it with my girlfriend, who sometimes watches American Horror Story.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Anyways,
Jerry Hart actually recommended on Facebook that we watch this. So I figured I'd give it a shot. I'd heard other reviews that said it was really good, and plus it's...
This is on Netflix, right?
Yeah, correct, on Netflix. It's actually directed by Mike Flanagan. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with him. He did Gerald's Game, which was also a straight-to-Netflix movie.
Oh, yeah, I hear that's really good.
Yeah, me too. And
I hear that's one of like the better Stephen King adaptations,
Yeah.
and I have not seen it at all.
Right, and after...
But I hear it's great.
Yeah, after watching Haunting of Hill House, I'm going to go watch Gerald's Game because I really like this. The whole thing isn't directed by him, but it's definitely show run by him. And anyways, it's really good. He also directed Hush, Mike Flanagan, that is. It's starring Carla Giugiano, I think is how you pronounce her name.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, she's really awesome. She was in Gerald's Game, and Henry Thomas from E.T. and Timothy Hutton, among many others, including this exemplary, just great child cast that just nail it. Like, you get 5 kids and one of them's not good, the whole cast is not good, right? And that whole child cast is just great. This show is about a family that was living in Hill House, and there's a traumatic event that happened, and we catch up with the children 20 years later, and all the children are all adults and are still trying to deal with the events, but in adult ways, explaining them away as fantasy or as something that didn't actually happen to them. The way this story is told is what I really like about this show. There are 7 members of the family, 5 children and 2 adults, and we spend an episode with each one. And we uncover some of the events that happened 20 years ago at Hill House, and then we also uncover events that have happened in modern times as they're trying to move forward with their lives. What's really cool is we will see events from one perspective in one episode, and then in another episode, it'll be recontextualized from a different perspective, and I really...
they Back to the Future to it.
Yeah. And
I love it.
Really great. And the other thing is, episode 6 may be my favorite hour of television this year. Lots of long shots in this, and it's all around this one event, and it's just so great. I got goosebumps right now talking about it. But it's just really great, and it may be my favorite episode of television this year, and that's including... I loved Better Call Saul. I thought Better Call Saul was great, but this, I think, was better than any single episode of Better Call Saul.
Let me ask you, before you move on, what exactly is the age range of this show? Like, is it an adult show, or is it like a family show?
So I would say...
You mentioned a child cast earlier, and I, up until you said that, was thinking like a TV show version of House on Haunted Hill.
Right. I think the House on Haunted Hill maybe...
Which is a movie, not a show.
Right. Is based on the same source material. I haven't looked into that, so I could be wrong. Let me know if I am. But I think it's all kind of based on the same source material. In fact, I was actually looking into the book that The Haunting of Hill House, and there's actually a play based on that book as well. So there's been a bunch of material on it. I would say this is definitely an adult thing. Adults are going to get it more than children are. It is a little scary. It's not too gory for children to watch. But I would say 13 would be fine. You know, it's
how many episodes are there?
Justin, how many episodes are there?
10.
Yes, there are.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, you know what? 10 may be the go-to number now, but that's better than the go-to number being 13.
Oh, right.
As the Marvel Netflix shows have showed us.
I agree. And the other thing that I like, I mean, the difference between like Maniac and this one are not the difference, but the difference between being on Netflix is you can make your show an hour and 9 minutes if you need that time, or you can make it 20 minutes or 30 minutes like Maniac did. And so the length of the show, it doesn't have to be an hour. It may be 10 episodes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an hour. So
are all of these different lengths?
Yeah, I would say anywhere from 50 to an hour and 9 minutes.
Nice.
So, I mean, they're pretty close, but 20-minute variation is pretty big. What I'll say is this, like in summation, it's not about the scares, although those are in there, and because you're so invested emotionally into these characters, the scares work better. But it's rather about the trauma and fear that just comes from living, and how we try to deal with these, just how we try to deal with living, you know, and the fear and the trauma that comes from it. It's so amazing. It's Halloween time, and it's the perfect time to watch it. But even if it weren't Halloween, I would recommend this wholeheartedly. So yeah, I liked it. I don't know if you guys could tell.
I could tell.
Oh, okay.
I was picking up what you were putting down.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
no, I gathered.
I'm really surprised that I liked it as much as I did, because I thought I'd try it and just see what happens. But it's really good. Worth the time. And I think actually, Justin, you and your girlfriend would have a good time watching it, especially around Halloween time, because that's what you guys are trying to do, watch some Halloween movies and stuff. But I think you guys would like this. Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and I think our intention is to watch it. I just don't know when.
Cool. So that was what's been on my mind. What is on your mind, Mike?
On my mind this week has been me catching up on Bojack Horseman Season 5.
Oh, right.
Which is also on Netflix.
Yes,
you talked about this, I believe, on some previous episode past, so I'll be brief and spoiler-free, especially since some people are not completely caught up yet. But
Justin.
Guilty. I have not seen this before, but after Mike and Chris have been talking about it lately, I started watching it. So I'm 3 episodes into the first season, so I'm very, very early on. So you have to be pretty careful.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but let me just say, I will be vague, but as for Season 5, I will say, man, this show is just so smart and funny, but that's not why I tune into it, right? I think what sets Bojack Horseman apart is it can go from smart and funny to heavy Sometimes it's a bit much, but I still quite like it. The way the writers continue to find new and interesting places to take these characters, and new points or ideas to explore with them, I'm just consistently impressed. And especially everything that's been going on over the last year made for some really great content for season 5. I'll just say that.
Yeah, agreed.
But some of the ways that they make the points that they're making are so poignant and so smart and just so, I don't know, just I'm impressed. You know what I mean? I just never thought this show could reach the depths that it does. So that's all. I will just keep it brief there and just say that I highly recommend BoJack Season 5. I think it's probably my second favorite season of the show so far. So I cannot wait for Season 6. What'd you say?
What's your first favorite?
Season 2.
Okay. I'm almost
I would
there.
say 2, 5, 3, 4, 1.
Wow.
I'll never remember that.
Yeah. Hey, I have a question real quick that just occurred to me. So you said you're excited about season 6. Should there be an expiration on BoJack Horseman? Should we end this at some point? Because, like you said, it is awfully heavy. Like, how much further can we go with BoJack?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there should be an expiration date on every single TV show.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think any show, personally speaking, unless you have a story to tell and content to back it up, I don't think any show should go more than 8 seasons. Preferably less than that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That said, right now, we're approaching season 6, and if you'd have asked me a year ago, I would have told you BoJack is slowing down, they can't do too much more with this character. But after season 5 and how they kept it so topical, I see now they can kind of do the South Park approach, right? And just kind of wait and sit back and see what happens and kind of base their show around current events.
Yeah, I would say that the topic of the last year ties in really well with BoJack specifically, though. So I'm not...
Yeah, just that character in general.
Yeah. That's being as big as possible. But yeah, so I was just curious. I think it should end pretty soon, like 1 or 2 more seasons, but it shouldn't keep going necessarily indefinitely.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
For the 8-season thing, where do you come down on something that splits like 2 half seasons? Like Breaking Bad did that. I guess Sopranos did that. Like their last season was 2 half seasons that were a little bit longer than a regular season.
I feel
like that should count as 2.
Yeah, I don't mind that if there's like time taken off in between to make it really good. The problem is quantity of episodes, I generally find to be the reason I want shows to end. And that just comes from trying to fill up time. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like I said, if you have story to tell and you have something to do, take as many episodes as you need. However, if you're just trying to, fill 22 episodes because you want it to last 5 months instead of 3, that's not a good reason to
Gotta hit that syndication.
Yeah, exactly. So Netflix and a lot of digital streaming places and premium cable don't have to worry about that, right? But we were talking about Walking Dead earlier. That show sucks. But the reason it sucks isn't because there isn't source material. Those comics, I assume, are good. There's plenty of fans, right? But they make 16-episode seasons, and their budget can't even really make like a 13-episode or 12-episode season look good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they tried in season 2, right? Season 1 didn't even look good, and it was only like 8 episodes. So don't push for more episodes if you don't have the content or the budget or the time to film them right. I listened to the Better Call Saul Insider podcast, and they say they keep Better Call Saul at 10 episodes because any more than that would just be too much strain on the show, and you would start to have to sacrifice somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's a hit, and they technically, if they wanted to, they probably could write 3 more episodes, but that would overall hurt the show's quality, and they know it.
Yeah. Less is more, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. So, Breaking Bad did it so smart, like they extended season 5 over 2 years and essentially had 6 seasons, but there's still only 5 seasons worth of episodes. They didn't start going 16 episodes until like the last year,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for the record, we were talking about The Walking Dead prior to recording for anybody who's hearing this.
Oh, yeah. Do we not talk about it on the show? My bad.
No. So some people might be confused, think they missed like part of the episode.
Oh, yeah. Good call. Thanks for covering me there.
Yeah. Just want to clarify. You guys didn't have like a memory loss segment where you just can't remember part of your life. That would be scary.
And we didn't edit it from your memory either. Yeah. All right. So those are my thoughts on BoJack Season 5. Justin, you recently just started BoJack Horseman. What are your thoughts so far?
So far, I think it's good enough to keep watching, but not enough to, I guess, like recommend or even like be that excited about yet.
Yeah, no, I understand that totally.
And yeah, from what I hear, it kind of builds and builds. And to make a comparison, I absolutely love Arrested Development, and my girlfriend and I just recently started rewatching that. She wanted to watch through it again.
Awesome.
And I'm even watching like the first 5-6 episodes of that show, and I'm realizing like how much better the show gets from where it starts, and like how the ball really starts rolling, and that show just snowballs and gets better and better and better. So BoJack is giving me the hope that I feel like it's going to do that. Like it's got a strong foundation to build off of, and I want to see where it goes.
Yeah, I was right there with you until I believe it was about halfway through the first season. So yeah, keep with it. I think you'll be rewarded for it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the second episode, which is the one where he eats the muffins from the not Vietnam. I don't know why I said Vietnam. The veteran who was like a penguin I don't remember what kind of animal they were. But yeah, he eats muffins from like a veteran. He takes them because the veteran was supposedly had dibs on them at a store. I really liked that episode a lot. And then the next one was like him and his daughter from the show, and she's older, and he like runs into her and lets her live with him for a while. That one I didn't like that much. Yeah, but the second episode was really, really good. So I'm hoping for more like that.
Well, let me just say, don't go in expecting hilarity. It's funny.
Yeah,
but pretty soon you'll realize the show is not concerned at all with being a laugh out loud riot.
Yeah, a lot of the jokes are almost what I would call like under the breath jokes, where if you won't notice them right away. The drama kind of BoJack is, I think, the point. But then there's all these under-the-breath jokes that you have to kind of really pay attention to catch on to.
Yeah, the area that the show is least succeeding in for me is the humor. But it's working in other areas, so, I'm on board with it, with that like balance that they've struck, which is not particularly funny yet, but it's still interesting.
Yeah,
still
cool.
Good characters.
I'm interested to see where you feel... a few episodes from now.
Yeah, so I'll keep you guys updated.
Cool.
And I believe we have a question that came in for Twitter that we wanted to talk about. All right?
Yeah, so this is in regards to our discussion of Venom, which took place on the A Star is Born episode. And this comes from @StrictlyTalking. It says, I liked your review of Venom. Question for you guys. Do you think the amazing quality of Marvel movies has set a high bar for all superhero movies? I guess implying that Marvel would have set the bar too high for Venom to achieve? Is that what the implication you guys got from the question?
Or that people have an expectation that superhero movies are going to be a lot better than
what Venom was?
Yeah, or what Venom is.
Yeah, if the Marvel movies didn't exist, people would generally like Venom more.
Yeah.
That's the implication I get.
Yeah, that is a good question. I often wonder that. Like, if Iron Man had hit the scene and started the connected universe thing and set the template for, what the MCU has become, would we still be making movies like Spider-Man 3,
Mm-hmm.
Or, right? Or, I guess we still are to some extent, right? Fox is still making their attempt at an X-Men connected universe. Well, I guess they're not anymore because Disney just bought them.
Yeah.
But they've tried for a couple years, and it's kind of felt like Venom, right? So I think to an extent, yes. I think you're right, strictly talking. I think Marvel has kind of changed what we expect superhero movies to be, and I think Venom feels a little slight because it's not connected to anything greater. Also, I feel like with the MCU, you have people who understand comics and what makes them appealing making these movies, whereas with like X-Men movies or Venom or superhero movies that aren't made by Marvel, like DC movies would be a good example. It feels like other directors who don't quite understand what makes comics so great or so appealing to the fans, trying to adapt them into something that they're just not meant to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with it does feel a little bit slight because it's not connected to a bigger universe. I actually would be very interested to hear what Justin has to say about this, because I think as he's the resident Marvel not liking as much as we do. So if the
That's official. That's an official term.
Yeah. If the Marvel movies aren't that good, how do you view it? That was said very weird. So how do you view the Marvel movies and the bar that they set for other movies, Justin?
Well, you also have to compare them to the other superhero movies you have seen that aren't part of the MCU as well.
That's true.
Sure. Yeah, so for me, I feel like The Dark Knight sets a high bar for all superhero movies. And if anything, I would say that the Marvel movies, as someone who doesn't necessarily see the quality of all Marvel movies as amazing, I think what they're doing is raising like the floor of where superhero movies should be. Does that make sense? Like they're making...
No, I think it makes total sense.
Yeah,
I think, but like, that's the same thing. It's the floor and the bar, I think, are the same thing.
True. Probably so. I guess, just going off personal opinion, Marvel movies are falling short of the bar for me oftentimes because I just wanted to point out, I guess, that the higher bar for me would be like The Dark Knight. Like to me, that's where the bar of like a good superhero movie is. And so I want to consider that one in there too. It's not just Marvel movies out there.
Yeah, and I'll say, even though this is not a discussion of the MCU, I will say I think The Dark Knight is better than any single MCU movie, like on its own.
Yeah,
but
I would
part
agree.
Of the appeal of but part of the appeal of the MCU isn't the individual title. It's the ongoing story and the conversation around it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the sum is greater than its parts, right?
Right, exactly. Like the fact that it exists as a whole to binge watch or, watch in chronological order or release order or change it up or exclude some or watch some, like that makes it all fun, I think, which is something that other superhero movies don't have going for them. So even when they're exceptional, you don't have reasons to revisit them as often, or they're not in your thoughts as often because there's no references to them, or et cetera, 2 or 3 times a year whenever you go to catch up on the newest one. So some people may consider that a flaw to the MCU, right? Because they don't want to watch a million movies to keep up with it. But as someone who watches movies anyway, I find that if they're going to be okay to good often and very rarely exceptional, I would rather them have connective tissue to make it worth my while.
Yeah. So let's tie this whole thing together and come back around. Is there a point for you at which the MCU universe movies will have gone on too far?
Ooh.
Like, should there be an expiration date on it, like a TV show's seasons?
Yeah, so I've actually been thinking about this the last year. I feel like Infinity War is approaching me having closure, right? So I guess as long as they can keep me intrigued as of to what comes next, I'm good to go. But I have my favorite characters, and they are approaching the end of their runs, And
right.
All of the new guard that appears to be taking over, I'm enjoying, but I'm not excited about. So, we'll see. I think once the story I'm into closes up, I'll just have to see if, the 2 or 3 times a year has me as intrigued as it did, a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's key to it, though, as well, is that they need to, at some point, wrap some stuff up, right? And move on from it.
You need to complete some arcs and then create new ones.
Right. And bring in new characters and stuff like that. So it's almost like a rolling TV show, and at some point, everybody that was started off in the TV show will no longer be in it. So,
like Doctor Who.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the appeal. You know what I mean? It's like every 3 or 4 years, if you're bored with it, don't worry. You'll have a new leading man or a new companion or a new showrunner to spice things up and make it a completely different feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like Days of Our Lives, but Doctor Who's probably a way cooler reference.
Maybe. Depending on who you are, I guess. But anyways, thanks for the question, Strictly Talking. On Twitter. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah.
But let's keep the same characters in this situation, okay?
Okay, yeah.
I'm not ready to be replaced.
Smart thinking.
Yeah,
Our contracts are still going strong.
Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, let's move into our review of David Gordon Green's Halloween.
Everyone in my family turns into a nutcase this time of year. Yeah, I mean, your grandmother is Laurie Strode. She was almost murdered.
Wasn't it her brother who murdered all those babysitters?
No, it was not her brother. That's something that people made up.
Do you know that I pray every night that he would escape?
What the hell did you do that for?
So I can kill him.
Look out!
The bus crashed.
Mom, what bus crash?
Michael escaped.
So, as always, before we get into our review of Halloween, just wanted to let you guys know that we're going to be speaking spoiler-free and very general for the next little while, and we're going to give you a spoiler alert before we move into spoilers so that you can pause the episode before getting anything spoiled for you.
All right, so Halloween, directed by David Gordon Green, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, and Andy Matichak.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds all right. I like it.
Cool. The IMDb synopsis says, Laurie Strode comes to her final confrontation with Michael Myers, the masked figure who has haunted her since she narrowly escaped his killing spree on Halloween night 4 decades ago. Cool. Mm-hmm. Okay, guys. So, who would like to go first on Halloween? What were your thoughts?
I can go first. Yeah, I don't do that a lot, so I'm down right now, though, so I'm going to embrace the moment.
Yeah, everyone take note.
Put that in your journal. Okay, so as a fan of the first Halloween, and that's about it. I never really watched the other ones. I saw some of the late 90s, early 2000s sequels, but I never saw any like Halloween 2 or 3 or any of the older sequels to it. Basically, I've just been a fan of the original one. As a fan of that, I was looking forward to this movie and looking forward to what they were doing with this movie with ignoring all of those sequels and making it basically a direct sequel to the original Halloween. I'm not that big on horror movies, but there's something about like the original Halloween that I really liked. There's a vibe to it. There's a tone to it, a look to the film that I really dug. And that film, of course, is like very, very indie, very low budget for the time. And this one is a much larger budget, much less indie. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the tone of this film and how much the tone and the look aligned and kind of felt appropriate next to the original Halloween. I also thought the film was pretty fun and entertaining. Like, I'm looking back on the film now, and since I've walked out of the theater, and I find these little points and little moments that, like, I thinking about it, like, I kind of don't like. And I think there's plenty of the film to nitpick and pull apart. But for me, while sitting there in the theater watching the movie, like 99% of the time, I was just enjoying the movie and I didn't think about those things. So for me, the movie was just a very fun ride, a very fun sequel to the original Halloween. Like, I found like most of the characters interesting. I found there were a lot of nods to the original Halloween that I liked. I'm sure there are nods to the sequels that I just didn't pick up on.
Plenty of nods, yeah. Plenty.
And I know I was just interested most of the time, and like, and just, you know, I don't want to say scared, but like I was in suspense plenty of times, right? Like the movie does a good job of being a horror film, of being scary, of keeping me nervous. You know, it's not just cool. It's like I'm not just enjoying it as a Halloween fan, right? Like it's just a good movie and a good horror film. And then, yeah, I really liked it. Like I said, I have my issues, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but overall, like, I think bottom line, like, the movie's just good and it's just fun. And I think that most people who don't have a lot of baggage with horror films or with Halloween films will probably enjoy it if you just, you know, go see it and let yourself enjoy it, right?
Yeah, totally. I agree. I'll go ahead and hop off of that.
Go ahead.
Say, so this film was actually on my most anticipated movies of the fall list. And that's because I've got a great fondness for John Carpenter's original movie from 1978, which is odd because I'm also, like you, not usually drawn to horror films, and like Chris mentioned earlier. But I watched it when I was very young, and ever since I saw it, I've always kind of liked the franchise, or at least the ones with Laurie Strode. There are some without Laurie Strode that I didn't even bother watching. I have not seen every single entry. I've seen the first one, which is what I would consider the only good one. And then I saw the second one, H2O, and then Halloween Resurrection. Oh, and the Rob Zombie ones.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah, me too. I didn't enjoy all of them, but I still like the franchise in kind of a pulpy slasher film kind of way. The first film, in my eyes, still holds up, especially because Carpenter was just starting out. He was such a talented director. It's such a simple plot. It lacks any kind of complex movie nonsense that comes with with a lot of movies, I think. It's just really bare bones, which I really admire. Now, as far as this film, I will start off and say that Halloween, the 2018 version, is the best Halloween reboot sequel we've gotten so far. It drops all of the nonsense the older sequels added, and like you said, takes place as a direct sequel to the first one, which means Laurie Strode is no longer Michael's sister, and he isn't cursed to kill his family members, or any of that nonsense. It's just back to the basics. I really enjoyed that. I will also say there are a couple scenes in this movie that I did not like at all, but it's been a few days since I saw the movie the first time. I actually watched it again last night, and I think it gets better. And I think the movie recovers from some of its shortcomings in my mind, which I'm sure we will talk about here in a minute. So all in all, I think it's a good movie. It's well made, it's violent, it strikes a similar mood to the first one, like you were saying, and most importantly, it's creative. It's got some really awesome shots, and there are plenty of creative ways that David Gordon Green films essentially what is a standard slasher film. Anyway, it feels like a labor of love. You can tell Danny McBride and David Gordon Green had a lot of affection for the original, and they added some social commentary in there to kind of keep it updated with the times. I'll just keep it there for now. For the most part, I liked it. But like you mentioned earlier, it can be pulled apart. But why would you want to do that?
I don't know. We probably will a little bit.
We probably will.
Probably will. That's what we're known for. Yeah, so I'm right there with you guys. Not very far off. I don't actually think... I think this weekend was the first time I ever actually saw Halloween, the 1978 version. I'd seen like the H2O one. Yeah, I know. Gasp. It's pretty crazy. I actually really enjoyed it, though, and it reminded me kind of a lot of Jaws. Like, very simple. The bad guys just coming after you. Just very, very simple, like you were saying. But it was really good and really well shot. I really loved the way the original one was shot. I watched H2O and didn't like it. I watched the Rob Zombie ones. Was not a fan. So when this new one came around, I wasn't excited until I heard David Gordon Green was directing it. And he's a guy that I've been following since George Washington, one of his first movies.
Oh, I thought you meant the first president.
Oh, well, I mean, he was the vice president, and so I've been following his political career. Wait, what? This is politics.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, what's happening? No, from George Washington, the movie. I've been following his career since George Washington, the movie, and the thing that piqued my curiosity about this was he's a guy that hasn't ever done a horror film before. He mainly does comedies and dramas. So
until he did comedies, he wasn't a guy that did comedies ever, right? I remember when he was doing Pineapple Express, and everyone was like, this is David Gordon Green's big step into comedy. This is crazy.
Right. And Danny McBride stuck around with him from the comedies, too. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, so this definitely had my interest piqued. And like I said, I was really glad I watched the 1978 version. Not because I necessarily need to know the plot from the 1978 version, but because of all the callbacks. I think it's cool to be able to have a fresh
also the mood, the score, all the stuff they're going for is all directly inspired from the first, not Halloween H2O or the Rob Zombie version, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and that's the thing that this movie does really well, is by treating that version with the respect and reverence it deserves, because it is a really great movie. Yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is really good in this. I think she's raw and fierce, and the character has been hardened by time, and I think she's really very compelling whenever she's on the screen. Where her character goes and how she's dealt with this trauma is what I've talked about earlier about The Haunting on House Hill. Is where this movie is rooted in realism, is through her character and what she had to go through, and how her character has dealt with the tragedy and the trauma from her youth. I think that makes that really compelling. I think Judy Greer is really great in this as Jamie Lee Curtis's daughter. I think that dynamic that Jamie Lee Curtis and her have is really well done. Imagine if your mom told you that somebody was going to come get you all your life. You'd think she was crazy too. And she is crazy until it happens, right? and then the other one, Andi Matichak, delivers perhaps a more typical slasher performance, and some of her scenes are the ones I dislike the most in this movie, but I think she does a good job. And then ultimately David Gordon Green pays enough homage to the original while moving the story along its logical path. And I think that was a really good choice for the film as opposed to some of the other choices that the other movies have made. I really enjoy where they've taken Laurie Strode as a character and think this is one of my favorite entries just into the slasher genre as a whole, like right up there with Scream. And I had a great time watching this film. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it more.
Yeah, so one of the things while we're kind of close to there, I want to say I do really like the idea of dealing with the aftermath of a tragedy. Like, that's something that I've always found interesting. And I don't know that I've seen a movie yet that is kind of set in the aftermath of an event like this. Like, that's not like another horror film, which this one kind of is. But like, I've always wondered, like, what would the movie be like about like Jamie Lee Curtis's characters? Was it Laurie Strode? Laurie Strode's life after the first Halloween movie, where like if like that made like national headlines and there was like she had to deal with like paparazzi and people reminding her of it all the time.
Yeah,
and like, we get a bit of that in this.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the whole time. Imagine, okay, so she survives a serial killer. A bunch of other people got murdered in a small town. Imagine her going back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine the conversations and the stares and the reputation she all of a sudden has, you know? Through no fault of her own. She's immediately isolated just for surviving.
Right.
That's the way I imagined it would have gone, right? Like this teenage girl who just did not deserve to have any of this dropped on her.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think she has a pretty severe case of PTSD as well, where she needs to prepare, and paranoia, you know, makes her want to prepare. So,
and it's sad to think that like one night when she was 17 changed the course of the rest of her life, right? Like she is now, at the time this movie begins, has been living longer than she was living when this tragedy happened to her.
Yeah. Yeah, living with the tragedy longer than she...
double the time she's been alive when it happened to her.
I think we get into some interesting territory where, like, I wonder how much our bias plays into the film of like, being familiar with the Halloween franchise and, like, the first Halloween movie, having had it for, like, 40 years. And, like, you know, we've had, 10 Michael Myers movies and stuff, where when we're watching Jamie Lee Curtis act the way she does in the movie, at no point are we, or at least I wasn't, like, on the side of the family who are like, Jamie Lee Curtis, quit being so crazy. Can't you just get past it? Like, why did you ruin my life? Like, everybody watching the movie, I think, is like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, she had to deal with Michael Myers and he might come back. Like, she needs to be prepared. Right.
Right.
Well,
so
right.
It's sort of a weird thing. It's like
and the reason we're there is because he is going to come back. That's why we're in the movie. So we're like, yeah, what she's doing makes sense because he's going to come back. But it'd be interesting if, like in this movie, she does all that preparation and then Michael Myers never shows up. And they're like, Mom, you're crazy, you know?
Yeah. And I guess I just bring that up as like the family side of it is a little bit lost on me as an audience member. Like, I'm pretty much only with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Sure. I felt that way the first time. But on the second time viewing, I really felt bad for Judy Greer's character, Laurie's daughter. You know? And the granddaughter is kind of like you. Sure. She's the audience surrogate, right? She's the one that's like in between Judy Greer and us. Or in between Judy Greer and Laurie. She's the one who's supposed to be like, well, you know, she had a terrible thing happen to her. I sympathize. Whereas Judy Greer is too close to it to even see the truth, right? At least, yeah. So anyway, I totally agree. I think Jamie Lee Curtis nails it. She has a vulnerability about her.
Vulnerability, and I think the fierceness. She reminds me a lot of like Sarah Connor from Terminator or Sigourney Weaver from Alien and Aliens, right? Did you guys get that at all?
Yeah, no, totally. That's a good comparison. Not as cool and prepared and confident and strong and tough as Ellen Ripley. You know, that's okay.
She might be more prepared in a literal sense.
Yeah, maybe so.
Than Ellen Ripley.
Maybe so.
So is this? Let me ask you something, Mike. I believe it was you, Mike. You mentioned that the film has like a social commentary. Is this sort of like the area of the film that you feel is like the social commentary of a woman dealing with this tragic event and feeling isolated? Like,
oh, sure.
Is that where the social commentaries come from, or is there like other stuff?
I think there's other stuff too. It's not anything deep, right? But like, okay, it's like the first Halloween. the argument could be made until the sequels came around and everyone had to take it in a literal sense. The argument could be made that Michael Myers is a manifestation of Laurie's fear of sex.
Oh, right.
So there's commentary there, even if it's not on the surface level. You have to dig deep to find it, right? This film has some surface level commentary of PTSD, survivors, and victims. It paints a pretty obvious picture of that, I think. And I think that's what the movie's mainly concerned with, right? Which is survivors of trauma and finding a way to move on from that trauma while never forgetting it, you know? But I also think there's a bit of commentary, and we can get more into it in spoilers because I have some specifics.
Okay.
But there are other characters in this film that are obsessed with Michael Myers, but not on a personal trauma level, but more as a obsessive, unhealthy level. And I think a lot of this film, while relishing in it, is also commenting on our obsession with real life serial killers and our glorification of them and how that can seep into almost every aspect of society, right? Okay, so like you have podcasters at the beginning of the film. They are society still romanticizing Michael Myers. Then you have Michael's doctor, who also has been obsessed with Michael Myers on a professional level, right? But it's still an unhealthy obsession. Mm-hmm. And Laurie's is an unhealthy obsession, right? So it seems like society is just unhealthily... That's not even a word. It seems like society is romanticizing Michael Myers. And just like we do with all these true crime dramas, you know, Making a Murderer or The Jinx or you name it, Serial, which is a podcast, which is more similar to what the characters in the movie are. I think there's some stuff there to be read. And like I said, we can get more into it in the spoilers, but it's not deep.
That makes sense to me. I mean, I didn't really think about the film in that sort of obsessive way or commentating on like how... Commentating, that's not a word. Or commenting on how we view serial killers or anything like that. So that's interesting. Like, I'm curious if on a repeat viewing, like paying attention to that sort of thing, like how much can be gleaned out of it, or is it, you know, just like you said, kind of surface level?
Yeah, we'll see. I like I said, I do have some examples to talk about in spoilers to be continued, you know?
Yeah. What did you guys think? We got a couple of Twitter questions about like the gore in the film and the violence in it. For me, I thought that this was like a really good mix of being scary in a sense of like having dread and like and suspense, and then also giving us like kind of the occasional gruesome death, like what, you know, we sometimes want out of a horror film, but it's not leaning on it heavily. Like, you know, I feel like we went through a phase in like the 2000s, the aughts, as they say, where we got like just super gory films. And, you know, like the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes were kind of like that. They were just like very gory and bloody from what I recall. Did you guys feel that the violence was like on the right level? Do you think it was too much, not enough?
Yeah, and that was submitted by, on Twitter, at Mashley at the Movies, which is a podcast you should check out. So I can go ahead and hop off of that question real quick, which was, I thought it was well-made movie, but far too gratuitously violent for my tastes. The first Halloween is not super violent, and I don't think this one is either. It has a lot of aftermath of violence.
Yeah, I would agree with it. I think there's one moment that maybe takes it a little bit too far. Can't necessarily talk about it in spoilers, but one moment that is a bit gratuitous, but nonetheless, it's pretty violent and gory. But I don't really think that there's much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a spice in the film as opposed to a main ingredient.
Agreed, yes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I wanted to ask you guys, before we move too far into this, I really dug the opening credits and the jack-o'-lantern coming back to life.
I thought that was awesome.
I thought that was so moody, so cool. Such a cool homage to the first credits of the first 78 version. What do you think, Justin?
Well, remind me again, what are the credits? It's been a while since I've seen the original.
It's just the jack-o'-lantern and it zooms in and it says Halloween to the right.
Okay.
It's very, very similar to this one, only there's no coming back to life.
Right. It's not like recomposing, I guess.
Right.
Well, I thought it was really bold. Extremely bold of a choice for the credits, because to me the whole message that I got from what they're saying is like, we are rebuilding this franchise. We are doing this one right. This is the shape. It starts out, this is the shape of the Halloween franchise, right? When the credits start, and
this is where we're at
decomposed.
now.
This is where we're at, and we're going to rebuild this thing. We're going to bring it back to life and do it justice.
That
right?
is
so.
That is such a great reading of that. I did not get that from it, but it's an amazing reading of it.
Yeah. So I thought it was very bold. I was like, okay, guys, you're making a claim right here up front, and
prove it.
I hope you deliver. Yeah. So that got me excited. So I really liked it.
One thing I liked a lot about this film was a lot of the meta commentary going on, and callbacks to the first one, Easter eggs, whatever you want to call them. There's like, for example, there's a part where Laurie, I believe someone's like, wasn't that his sister? And they're like, no, that was just something someone made up, which is like a comment on Halloween 2, where they got rid of that. Then one kid is like, he only killed like 5 people. What's the big deal? Which is like what everyone says about the first one now, since not that many people die by modern slasher film standards. All kinds of stuff like that all throughout the film. I really enjoyed that. It's kind of breaking the fourth wall, but not really. You know what I mean? Like, if you haven't seen those other movies, that won't register to you as an odd line at all.
Right. Yeah, and it's a better, kind of more fun way of doing it than did you guys see like the remake of Vacation with Ed Helms? Or not the remake, I guess, but kind of a sequel.
The National Lampoons.
Yeah.
The one with Christina Applegate.
Yeah, there's a scene and it's in the trailer, so I'm not really spoiling anything in that film, but there is a scene where they're like, we're going to go on the same vacation you did like however long ago. Isn't that going to be dumb? Like, no, this vacation's going to be much better than the other vacation. And it was like really on the nose and not that clever.
Right. Well, that's kind of like Laurie being like, you're the new Loomis in this film. So there's some of that, I think.
I guess so. That's true. But those particular moments that you were talking about, I thought were a little more fun. Like you said, if you don't get them, they just seem like whatever.
Yeah, they just seem like exposition.
I really liked how, speaking of the homages, Jamie Lee Curtis, a lot of the time, or Laurie Strode in the movie, she, like, for instance, the granddaughter is in class, and it's the exact same shot as the original Halloween. And then it cuts to outside, and Laurie Strode's out there instead of Michael Myers. And I found that really interesting. And they put Laurie Strode in a lot of the 1978 shots that were Michael Myers, if that makes sense. They're like she mirrors Michael's. She mirrors Michael a lot in a lot of the shots. Mm-hmm. But what I would say is, in character, her purpose more resembles Loomis from the first one.
Right.
She is the new Dr. Loomis who is saying, hey, there's no reason to keep him alive. There's nothing of value here. There's nothing new to learn. He's evil. Kill him. That's what Loomis was. The Doctor in this one serves a completely different purpose than Dr. Loomis did in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So they use Laurie Strode a lot to mirror Michael and Dr. Loomis more than her actual self from the first one.
Right. So I really like the music in this film.
Me too.
A particularly great moment about 1/3 of the way through, and it just kind of... It made me feel like, oh, all right, the movie's started, the action is happening, and we're in it now, and I was just excited, it was just really good. So yeah, I really enjoyed the music. I thought it was great, and John Carpenter, I believe, had a hand in that, if not, did it.
Yeah, no, him and his son did the score.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I saw like in the credits. John Carpenter, did part of the
he also signed off on the script, so he
That's
had
cool.
a heavy hand in making this better than any of the other Halloweens that have happened since the 78 version.
Yeah. The score was like super rad, and that kind of goes with like the tone of the film for me being so spot on with the tone of the original, and carrying over so much of what I liked from the original. And something else that I really loved was, like, you brought it up, Chris, like the way it was shot. I love the way that this film was shot. Like, it was kind of this, it had sort of like this retro indie look at times, but like while also not looking kind of bad. Like, I mean, I like the way the first one looks, but it looks bad.
But like, it looked good.
Yeah, it kind of had this gritty feel without going into that, like, a sort of over the top sort of grindhouse era with like not era feel with the film grain and like the kind of dirtiness of the film sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One thing I liked a lot was, and I think this is what Chris is hinting at, there's a lot of Steadicam used in this film where someone follows Michael Myers in a very long shot through where he's walking, and we follow him walking and we kind of see his, for lack of a better word, process, right? For how he does things. And I thought that was so fascinating the way they do it. And I was watching some YouTube videos about it, and they were saying that David Gordon Green told the new actor playing Michael to look at cats, like his own cat, like a feline, and the way they hunt and the way they move for inspiration for Michael. And you can kind of see it in his performance, I think, how he is so stealthy yet quick at the same time. Like he's only focused on what's in front of him. He doesn't deal with everything else. He moves very swiftly and purposefully every time. It's like there's not a wasted movement. And I think watching that's not how humans move, right? And it's very bizarre and eerie following it. And there are some scenes where, we follow him, he'll pick something up, he'll walk somewhere else, and we know exactly what he's thinking, but we don't know where he's going to go or where he'll land. It seems so random sometimes. I don't know. It's very compelling, I think. Did you guys feel that at all?
Yeah, following him around with the camera, before he gets onto Laurie Strode, where he's just kind of randomly killing. But yeah, there's one particularly long take that I really enjoyed. I'm a sucker for long takes. During
Absolutely.
that Halloween festivities, and there's kids wandering all over the place, and it's just full of activity, but, Michael Myers is in the center of our attention, and it's really great.
Yeah. The whole look and vibe of Act 2 of this film is just so fun.
Yeah, but I think that's where the film is the most successful, isn't that Act 2 section where we get, Michael Myers being Michael Myers and walking around on Halloween night and, doing what he does. And I think the film gets weaker later on, and I bring that up now because I don't want to remember to talk about it once we get to spoilers because I can't be too specific, but
sure.
There are parts of the third act of the film that I think the film loses me a little bit, or it kind of changes to a point where like it's not quite the same movie, and it's at times like a less interesting movie for me.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree with that 100%. But what I will say is most of the problems I had with Act 2 going into Act 3, which I have a feeling you're talking about the same stuff. I was able to reconcile that in my brain after a few days of thinking about it. So, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I'm excited to talk to you more later.
Yeah. And it's not like a logic sort of thing necessarily. It's just like just what's happening and where the film goes.
Right. And I'll say, yeah.
I can't say right now.
It seems like a little too plotty. It seems too movie-y.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe we're close to moving into spoilers. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think I got one more thing. It's a tweet that I wanted to just I had the same, I think it's an interesting topic to talk about. It's from Holmes Movies, or Holmes Movies, it's at Holmes Movies Pod. It had its good moments, but was let down slightly by a weak script and narrative. Found the comedic parts unnecessary and off-putting. There were some opportunities missed with this film. While I don't necessarily agree with the script part that he said, I do think that the comedic parts are, while I didn't necessarily find them off-putting, but I was wondering how you guys felt about it.
Yeah, so I'll say that none of the comedic parts bothered me. I was definitely aware of them. Right? It definitely feels like a Danny McBride sense of humor a lot of times. That said, the movie had me smiling quite a bit. And what I will say is my favorite character of the movie is Julian, which is one of the kids that is being babysat by one of the characters in the movie.
Yeah, that kid is great.
Yeah, I think that kid is wonderful. And if all the other humor didn't land for me, and that kid was still in the movie, I would happily make that trade to have Julian in the movie. I think Julian is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's so funny. He works as the audience surrogate, and the kid is a good actor.
He was really good.
Yeah, so I'll just say that.
I was a little nervous when he first showed up. Like, I think his first line, or maybe it was his first two lines or something, kind of made me a little uneasy. I was like, oh no, is this going to be like a bad choice to like put this kid? Because I could tell like he's going to be, a like comedic relief, right?
Right.
And I was like, oh no, how's this going to go? But shortly thereafter, I was on board with him. I was like, he's great. I just love him. I think he's funny. And I mean, a lot of the comedic parts of the movie worked for me. I'm trying to think of parts that didn't work, and nothing sticks out to me. Like nothing stood out in my head as like, oh, well, that's not funny. That sure bombed.
Yeah, there are a couple of
my theater was laughing.
conversations. Yeah, there are a couple of conversations that I think are pointless, but I don't think they're taxing, right? They're not like, oh, God, let's get through this.
Yeah, and as far as the weak script and the narrative, like the first Halloween movie, I mean, it's like literally just the guy going around killing people. There's not much
Pretty bare
narrative
bones.
to it. Yeah, like
Right.
I think that this movie and the type of movie it is, and the film that it's replicating and paying homage to so much is a weak script and narrative. I guess not weak in a bad sense, but just it's not very fleshed out, not very
script and
full.
narrative. Slight sounds
there
better
you
than
go.
weak.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's very simple. Simple setup.
Yeah, but no, to answer your question, it definitely feels like Danny McBride rebooted Halloween. But that said, Danny McBride's pretty funny sometimes, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
And those moments were few and far between. I
Right,
mean, there was
exactly.
some in there, but there wasn't overwhelmingly comedic.
yeah, it's not Pineapple Express 2.
Yeah. Halloween Boogaloo. That's what they should have named it.
Yeah, missed opportunity.
It's not like we're getting like the Cabin in the Woods or Drag Me to Hell version of Halloween here. Like
Right.
There's so few comedic parts. Like I said, I'm struggling to even remember more than a couple.
And I
Yeah.
think they serve a purpose from they're breaking the tension. All right, we've had a lot of tension. We've killed some people. Now let's laugh a little bit and joke around, and then we're going to go back to the tension and killing,
Yeah, exactly. This movie's a lot more relentless than the first one, too. So, So it makes sense that they would need to break up that tension. So, yeah, anyway, good question, though.
Yeah. Okay, so I think the only thing we have left before we move into spoilers is our recommendations. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that you should go watch this in the theater. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm always hesitant to say this, but I think that this movie is fun with a crowd. My crowd wasn't overly loud, but they had reactions that I enjoyed, enjoyed watching with them. So, yeah, I think go see this in the theater. I don't know that you necessarily have to see it in the theater, but while you can, do it. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, so as someone who's a fan of the original John Carpenter movie, this movie is respectful. It's better than his Halloween 2. It works as one of those sequel reboot things where you don't have to see the first one, but you're going to enjoy it a lot more if you do. That said, it has some stuff that I think isn't great, but it's there for a thematic purpose, and for that reason I can forgive it. But anyways, it's just a lot of fun, and it's about as good as a slasher film, in my opinion, can be. And the soundtrack is awesome, thanks to the legendary John Carpenter.
I pretty much agree with everything you guys have said. So I would say definitely see it. I would say in theaters it's probably better. This is the rare horror film that, watching it with a crowd can enhance your fun, or at least enhance my fun to time. Like sometimes my audience was, literally cheering and clapping. And
oh, yeah. There's some stuff in Act 3 where people were real into it. And the more into it they were, the more into it I was,
Mm-hmm.
For sure. But that being said, if you don't see it in theaters, seeing it at home would also work. Like, because watching horror movies at home works because you're in your house, you turn out all the lights, and your house gets like spookier.
True.
So, see it any way you can. I think
It's science.
definitely see it. It is science.
Cool. All right. So, spoiler time, right?
Let's head on over
yeah.
to Spoiler Town.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
I'll tell you what, you know them cigarettes you got up there, I'll tell you all about it.
And here we go.
All right, so now that we're in spoilers, I wanted to talk about something I didn't like very much and to get your guys' opinion on it, and that is a lot of the granddaughter's storyline I didn't particularly like, and I thought it was somewhat cliched, such as the high school rave party, which I don't know how often you guys went to high school dances, but I never went to a high school rave party. Like
I went to one.
A rave party?
No, high school dance.
Okay. Was it anything like this high school dance?
No, it never is. But if you tried to put my high school dance on film, it would suck and look stupid. So I get it. True. You have to hype it up, right?
That's true.
Makes it cinematic.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't necessarily like that whole drama that happened between her boyfriend and stuff like that. Didn't really have me, and I wanted to get back to the Jamie Lee Curtis stuff. It wasn't even that I minded the granddaughter's acting. I just thought that was a tangent that we didn't need to go on necessarily. What do you guys think?
While I will agree that it is way less interesting than hanging out with Jamie Lee Curtis and Laurie Strode or Michael Myers, I don't think that it's pointless or unneeded. In fact, I think it's almost a necessary evil. Like if you're going to do a reboot legacy sequel that works as both a reboot and a sequel, you can't have us following around, 65-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis the whole time. You have to have young people in your slasher film, right? You have to have
people about to have sex.
Yeah, well, you have to have just young people, right? Like no one wants to watch a slasher film starring a bunch of old people.
Yeah, you have to have the slasher film elements.
Yeah, you have to deliver on that, right? And because she was connected to Laurie Strode, I did like her.
Yeah, I liked her.
That said, the boyfriend segment, the dance segment, while not great, they don't take up too much screen time to be overly offensive or drag the movie down. But what I will say is, I feel like a lot of characters at a certain point are just dropped from the script and not brought back up again.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like, you have the boyfriend character who was set up to get killed. Who doesn't?
Totally.
Which is fine. But then you also have like this other guy, just a sidebar real quick. You have like this black cowboy guy with like a cowboy hat on, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have this guy who's like a character.
Total character.
Yeah, he's got affectations. He's got a unique wardrobe. He's got a unique vibe going on. And he's in like 3 scenes and never has like a ending scene that like signs him out of the movie, which is fine. But I feel like the boyfriend character and that character in particular, they are just kind of dropped from the script and never mentioned again, which isn't necessarily a problem. But considering how much screen time we spent on them, I wanted to see them get murdered.
Right. And while I dislike the dance sequence, I do think it gave me my favorite sequence, and that's when the friend is murdered in the backyard. That's that
with
music,
the motion detecting lights.
Yeah, but that's the music cue that I really liked when the granddaughter sees Michael Myers for the first time, and then there's this music cue, and it just knocked it out of the park in that moment. So.
I 1000% agree with that. That music in that scene was so good. Mm-hmm. So good.
Mm-hmm. And there's that whole scene. Like, I really like that. That's one of the scenes where, like, the comedic bits worked for me. Like, when that guy was sitting there and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm drunk. I'm sorry for being in your yard. I was just trying to take a shortcut and kiss a girl." But it's like Mike Myers standing there. Like, that whole scene was very funny to me. And just, like, the element of the motion detector lights going out made for a really unique horror film scene to me.
Yeah, I like the motion sensors for sure.
Yeah, and I will say about the dance sequence, and before we move it off, what I like about that scene is what's going on. I agree is not that interesting, and we don't really care about it. But what it's there for, or what's really going on for me in that scene, is the suspense of her not answering her phone, and like how she loses her phone, right? And that I enjoyed. Like, I was just like, "Come on, answer your phone, please."
Yeah,
because I liked her. I didn't want her to die, right? Like, that's what I was getting out of the scene. I didn't care about the boyfriend.
That said, even if your phone was thrown into a bowl of Jell-O punch or something, I feel like no teenage girl would leave that phone behind.
Nah, she would punch that dude and take it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, she would take it with her for sure. But that's whatever.
So one thing I do want to talk about is the Mike Myers character, and something that I really liked about what they did with his character in the movie, because as we've talked about in like the previous versions, they made him Laurie's brother, and then it was about revenge and going after her. Like, so that's what I remember from Halloween H2O, is he's like specifically coming after her. But what I like about this movie is like none of that really matters to him. Like he seems like just an evil dude that just wants to kill people. It's almost by chance that he ends up back with Laurie.
Right. Well, to jump off of that, I agree. I think it's great. Michael, personally, based on all the evidence we see in the film, Michael does not seem to care one way or the other about Laurie Strode or her family or seeking them out or hunting them. Yes. Every time Laurie Strode is mentioned in regards to Michael Myers is completely from other people. It's from Laurie herself, who has a reason to be hung up on Michael Myers. Like, that is her abuser that she has been fearing for 40 years. But the other person who seems to try to make the case that Michael is connected to Laurie somehow is the doctor. And the only reason Michael ends up near Laurie at all is because the doctor drags him there, literally.
Yeah.
I think that personally makes Michael way more interesting because, hey, guess what? I'm not related to Michael Myers. I'm not scared of him if he's only going after, you know what I mean? If he's only going after his family. So it's way scarier if I could just be in my house and he's walking down the street and sees me through a window, you know? So in my eyes, all of the plotty story stuff that comes through is entirely other characters projecting onto Michael their own stuff. And Michael is just essentially an animal who's going to do what he's going to do when you let him loose in the right area.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I think like the comment about like the weak script and narrative and us talking about like the original film and like how it's basically like a plot and script slight film. Like that's why, because exactly as you said, like just a dude killing people for no good reason is a lot scarier than someone with logic.
Yeah, he's
he's a target.
He's a murder machine. That's all he wants to do. He's indiscriminate about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, I mean, not to be too much of a downer, but like I am less scared of someone who murders their wife than I am of like that dude who like shot at the Las Vegas concert, right? Because it's like indiscriminate.
Yeah, exactly.
It's scary.
No, totally. One thing, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, one thing that I think gets better upon reflection, or at least a repeat viewing, is the doctor twist.
I do want to hear how you feel about that on a second viewing and what you saw in it, because I know it took me about 30 seconds to a minute the first time to not think it was real stupid.
Right, exactly. The first time I saw it, I was like, why is this happening? This is too plotty. This feels like a movie and not what I expect of Halloween, right?
Yes.
I guess one thing that helped me, I guess, upon looking back, was the doctor is likely the one that caused the escape to begin with, right? Like,
sure.
He was the only survivor, and at the time I didn't think about it, but anyways, later when he freaks out and kills Hawkins, it caught me off guard. So I thought it was bad, and it took me out of it for a bit. But the more I thought on it, the more I think it fits, at least thematically. It's still, that said, my least favorite scene in the movie. But again, I think it's hitting on an important theme, which is, Loomis 2.0, whatever his name is, Sartain or whatever the hell his name was, has likely been wanting a chance to study Michael Myers for years, right? And since Michael never talks or does anything when he's in captivity, creating the escape was the way to make it all happen. Knowing this would have helped a lot of the decisions that didn't sit right with me make more sense later. Like, for example, I didn't understand why the doctor would bring amateur podcasters in there to rile up his patient, right? Like at the beginning of the movie. I was like, why would any doctor do this? Look what a ruckus they're making, right? How unprofessional. And then later you realize that's the point. You know, he's trying any way he can to rile up Michael Myers to get some kind of reaction before he goes to that other prison. And he no longer gets to study him anymore, right?
Yeah, and it makes sense of like, because initially when he gets on the bus too, I was like, that's weird.
Yeah, exactly. And
like, it doesn't really make sense for him to do it. But
exactly. And at the beginning, before he even gets on the bus, they're in the building and he says, "Don't worry, Michael, I'll be with you the whole time." And that's before they get on the bus, right? So obviously that motherfucker caused that wreck, right? Which makes way more sense to me than incompetence.
Right.
It also makes more sense to me why he would make some of the decisions he chooses to make later on in the movie. Mm-hmm. Because we wouldn't even be watching the story if it weren't for him in the first place, you know? That said, he also works as a parallel to Laurie Strode. Laurie prayed for Michael's to escape or prayed for Michael to bust out somehow, right? And then the cop is like, why would you pray for that? And Laurie is like, so I could kill him. So she's incapable of moving on until she gets Michael to escape. The doctor is incapable of moving on because Michael has been his life's obsession until Michael escapes. The only way Michael can give these people who are obsessed with him any kind of closure is to go about proceeding to do the one thing that he shouldn't do, right? Which is the one thing that he wants to do. And so for some reason, I think it's more interesting to look at it as society's unhealthy obsession with killers almost creates environments for them to thrive.
Sure.
And it romanticizes them in such a way to where we revere them almost, when in reality, we shouldn't.
Yeah, well, that's like you hear about the people that commit like heinous acts, and then like part of the thing is they want to be remembered, and so sometimes you run into the people that like don't even talk about them, like we shouldn't even say their names,
exactly,
because like they shouldn't be, famous or they'll be glorified by somebody.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Well, it's like what it was on Reddit like this last week, right? There was a quote from Marilyn Manson that was floating around that took place after Columbine, and it was some article he wrote which was like, hey, we shouldn't give so much attention to these kids. Don't be surprised if every kid who's ever been bullied has a new hero. And
right.
What he's doing is he's commenting on the media and society's romanticism and the fever pitch we all get into when we talk about a new heinous crime. We love it. We love documentaries on it. We love podcasts on it. We love TV specials on it. We love talking about it. And so while the movie is also reveling in that, I also think there is a commentary there with the podcasters and with the doctor and with Laurie of romanticizing someone that shouldn't be romanticized and giving him more power than he would otherwise have.
Right. And just on like a script writing purpose, like the characters are foils of each other in a sense, is that like she wants him to escape so he can die. She can kill him. But the doctor wants him to escape
so he can observe
so that
him.
he can live.
Yeah.
In a sense, like, because in captivity, for all intents and purposes, Mike Myers is catatonic. Like, he's not truly alive.
Exactly. He hasn't been able to even observe his life's obsession properly.
Yeah, which is interesting. And I thought about that eventually and through some of the things that he talks about. But, it has that moment of that when he stabs the cop and you're like, oh, what?
Yeah, exactly. And watching it the second time, the scene plays a lot better in my eyes, right? Like, it's still the most plotty movie-y thing in the whole thing, right? Which, like, if anything's going to bring you out of the movie, it's that scene.
Yeah.
But that said, what initially rubbed me the wrong way about that scene at first was like when the doctor puts on the mask.
Right.
And you're like, why would he do that?
That's what I was about to say.
Even though you have the conversation of him being like, I want to know what it's like when Michael kills someone. I don't think the doctor was setting out to kill anyone. That only happened because he needed to keep Michael alive. And then when he puts on the mask, it was more just like, when in Rome. Like, I've already done it. I do want to know what it feels like. Let's go ahead and put it on real quick. And also, it paves the way for in the future, if they decide to go with the route of Michael Myers being dead in the sequel. It also paves the way of the idea and copycat killers and the romanticism of Michael Myers to continue on through, another Dr. Loomis 2.0 or another copycat of someone who was, or another podcaster, someone who was obsessed with Michael Myers, right? Someone who was romanticizing him. Now that the doctor has done that, has set the way for them to proceed with the franchise, I think. Yeah,
well, I also think where the movie ends does that as well with the granddaughter character.
Yeah. So
I don't know if you guys got that vibe at all, or if you want to move on there yet.
Yeah, we can move on from what I was talking about. I'm sorry, that was pretty long, but
I do agree with you. Before we move on, I think you're right, and I think the film almost seems like he's gonna take over and start killing people and get like that taste for it and turn into Michael Myers. And I'm so glad it didn't, because that's what I thought it was gonna be.
I think it's smarter than what it initially seems like.
Yeah.
So, are we ready to move on into the third act?
Yeah, I am. That's all I have left to talk about is third act stuff, and
all right, let's do it.
Some issues and some things that are cool.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to say is the third act of this film, I think, is very strong. If I had to list my main complaint about the movie, it would be that I feel like Judy Greer's character does not get to really come into her own until the last act of the movie. I would have liked a little bit more Judy Greer and less boyfriend or less like friend zone guy for the granddaughter. Because I think Judy Greer, I think the relationship between her and her mother is so good. And in the final act of the movie, when Judy Greer and Laurie are both in Laurie's house together, and the granddaughter's not there yet. She's still running through the woods or whatever. I think there is a scene whenever Michael is outside the house and Judy Greer's character, her husband, is getting murdered outside by Michael. There's a scene where Judy Greer is like, "What's going on, Mom?" And Laurie Strode is like, "It's okay, baby, run." And like she talks to her like she would like a 4-year-old daughter, you know? And this is like a 70-year-old, 65-year-old woman talking to a grown woman who has a daughter her own, right? But the dynamic between them in that instance goes back to that of like a newborn or like a toddler. The way Laurie is comforting her daughter despite their rocky relationship. The way the dynamic immediately goes to mother protects daughter and is strong for daughter. Like that whole dynamic was very subtle, but I thought it was very well done. Did you guys pick up on that at all during that scene?
Yeah, what I really liked about that is that if you look at things, I guess, from like Judy Greer's perspective, what's her name in the movie? Karen?
Yeah, thank you. I was just calling her Judy Greer the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I was about to do the same. And I'm probably not even going to call her Karen again, but now we know. She, was pulled away from her mother at a young age, like what was like Child Protective Services or whatever came and like pulled her away.
Yeah, like 12 or something.
I get the feeling that like she spends all of this time thinking that like all her mom cared about was this tragic event. She couldn't look past it to be a mother, to care for her, to love her. And then in this scene when like it happens and it's there, like I think she gets it. I think we get exactly what you said is like the love is there. She just didn't understand it.
Right. Exactly. Like this is the way her mother knows how to communicate love. Right. It's not like what she wanted maybe, but it's there and it's real. And yeah, there's a certain,
I really like that.
Yeah. There's a certain aspect of it where I think it was just beautifully played, especially by Jamie Lee Curtis.
Agreed. And Judy Greer is really great in this too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She gets my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah. I think also at a moment that Judy Greer's like old training kicks in that house too, where she like knows what to do and where everything is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And did you notice all the men in this movie are so ineffectual and goofy that this movie has a very strong like girl power message to it. But like, I don't know, I guess it's intentional, right? Like the boyfriend character is like this super lame, dumb guy. The boyfriend's best friend who's like, Captain Friendzone.
Captain Friendzone.
Is not very cool either. And then even Karen, Judy Greer's husband in the film, he's making goofy jokes about peanut butter on his penis.
Yeah.
Right? Or like, he's just like a goofball, right? And so, I don't know. I just think it's interesting that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride chose to make all the men like losers and make the women the heroes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have too much to comment on it, but it is interesting. It is cool. Kind of fun.
These movies are typically about, especially slasher films, but are typically about women being terrorized anyways, right? So I'm glad that they took that step and elevated Jamie Lee Curtis and Judy Greer and the granddaughter and made them as powerful as they were in this movie.
No, I agree. And also it updates the politics and the commentary of slasher films as well, right? Like Halloween kind of started the whole having sex will get you killed mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that that's what the movie had in mind whenever it was being created, but that's what happened throughout the 80s. Right. And I think this film feels like a very natural evolution of that. It feels like a very modern evolution of that.
Which I'm pro at that.
No, that totally feels right and true and good and what needs to happen, right? Like, I think, gender dynamics and gender politics within slasher films is definitely something that I think dated the genre and stopped it from being such a hit recently, right? But hopefully this movie will bring it back and we'll have like a more thoughtful era of slasher films, as long as they're good slasher films.
Those almost sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah, I know. We'll see what happens, right? I'm just speculating. I'm just spitballing here. It's not gonna.
Yeah, and Halloween is a thoughtful slasher film. It's just unusual. I have a question for you guys though too. So At the very end, they've trapped him in the basement, which I think was pretty badass the way they did that. Judy Greer got a really great moment.
Yeah, I was
there.
about to say, before we talk about that, let's talk about how cool Judy Greer was in that moment when she was like, Mommy, I can't.
Yeah.
Yes, can't do it. I'm sorry.
Oh, that was so cool. That was so cool.
He pops up and what does she say? What was the line that she uses?
She's just like, gotcha, or something like
yeah,
that.
did you just say gotcha?
Yeah. It's so cool. Oh my God, it's so cool. That is my favorite part of the movie. It is.
Oh, and then I think, isn't that the moment where Jamie Lee Curtis's face pops up like in the mirror or something?
Yeah, right after that, she shoots him, and then there's the mirror of the shot from the first one. Whenever his face pops up behind her.
Right, yeah. I
and
love
she's
that
like,
shot.
Happy Halloween, Michael. And then she stabs him.
Yeah.
And before that, whenever she's fighting with Michael in the house, there's that moment where he knocks her off the balcony, mirroring the end of the first one where Michael gets shot off the balcony. And then when he goes to check for her, she's gone.
It's so good.
What happens.
Yeah.
So good. That's the moment, like, whole theater in my theater, like, started cheering and clapping and, like, hooting and hollering.
Yeah, because that's the moment, at least in my eyes, when I was no longer scared for Laurie Strode.
Oh, yeah.
That's the moment when I was like,
sure,
she's the one to fear. You know what I mean? Like, that's a cool turnaround.
Right.
It is. So talking about the whole basement thing, this is something that I guess I really want to find out what you think about it, Mike, having seen it twice, but I'm not sure if I missed something, but whenever they trap Michael in the basement, Judy Greer has the line where she says, you know, it wasn't a cage, it was a trap.
Mm-hmm.
And that implied to me that the whole plan revolved around trapping Mike Myers in the basement and then setting the house on fire and burning him alive, basically. And at that point, and still since then, like, the actions that they take throughout that whole third act where they're in the house and Mike Myers is around the house don't really make a lot of sense if that is the plan.
Okay. So, yeah, I have an answer to that.
Okay.
He could have been trapped in any room. It didn't need to be the basement. You remember she had metal doors on every single room, and she went through the rooms one by one to trap him in there?
Right.
And the basement was not the only one rigged to explode with gas and a flame. Every room had one of those.
Okay.
There was I think we saw 3 or 4 of them throughout the house.
Yeah.
Of various gas places with flames. So I think her plan was just trap him in a room and burn the whole goddamn house down around him, no matter what room it is.
Yeah. Well, I guess I got thrown off by that because I wasn't sure that the rooms were all, like, sealed. Like, I thought she was kind of, like, making sure that he couldn't, like, sneak up on her. But, like, the room where she fights him in, there's the door in the house, but I wasn't sure if there was that sort of, like, grate that would come down on the outside wall, like those doors that led to the balcony.
Yeah, she didn't spring the trap for the last room, but that was also the room she got thrown out of. You know, she never got the chance to clear it properly. So I assume, just like every other room in the house that she had just visited, that room had a similar, like, bar closed thing that would trap whoever's inside in there, you know?
Okay, so it wasn't exclusively the basement, which that makes sense to me now.
Exactly. Yeah, there were plenty of rooms that were rigged to explode, and every room, from what I could tell, had a metal, like, I got you trapped in here, fuck you.
Well, it seemed like no matter what, the whole house lit fire. It didn't seem like she did.
So I think as long as she could trap him in there and burn it down, she was happy.
Just had to trap him in that one room, and it wasn't necessarily the basement.
And this is weird because, like, it's a film that ignores the other sequels to Halloween, but knowing those other sequels, I know that there's a bit of, like, an invincibility about Mike Myers and that you really need to kill him, you know? Like, he can get away and survive a whole lot. So, like, in my head, I was a little bit like, well, trapping him and setting the house on fire, like, you're not going to stay in there the whole time or you're also going to die. Like, that it seems like a surefire way to assume that Michael Myers is dead and not actually see him die. Like, it seems like there's a better way. You know what I mean? Like, the whole time I was like, we're not seeing him die, and that bugs me.
Well, check this out. So the original ending of the movie was reshot. Originally, Laurie confronts Michael outside. She stabs him. He stabs her. They have a knife fight. Eventually, he stabs her in the chest. And before he kills her, the daughter or the granddaughter, one, shoot Michael with a crossbow. And then Michael gets away into the woods while the 3 women run away. And apparently they tested this ending and it did not sit well. And so they came up with the ending that we see in the movie. And if I had to imagine why it didn't sit well, I would imagine it's from the overwhelming frustration of only shooting Michael once and letting him get away with a crossbow, right? Like, there's no way he can possibly conceivably get away and you forgive the characters for letting him live in that scenario. Whereas in this scenario, they have to leave the house because it's burning. So it still leaves that like 5% room for Michael to live.
Yeah.
Which is better than us being frustrated at them for letting him go.
Well, and that actually brings me to the point that I was talking about earlier. I got a certain satisfaction, and I was very worried that I wouldn't get this from this movie, especially with Laurie Strode's character having dealt with this trauma for 40 years, and then her not getting that satisfaction. But I was glad to watch Michael Myers burn, even though I know there's going to be a sequel. He may be in it, or maybe a disciple or whatever, but I got a certain satisfaction out of that moment where the three women are standing above him, he's looking up, and the fire erupts around him. And there's like a fuck yeah moment there where they win.
It's like a reckoning for like 3 generations of trauma.
Right.
That this man has he's touched all of their lives somehow, even before this very night that we're seeing, right? Like he has in some way dramatically altered each of their lives. And so to see all 3 of them get closure is going to be great, or is great, even though we likely know that there's going to be a Halloween 3 or 2. I don't even know what they would call the sequel to this one. But they also leave the room open because of the psychiatrist thing and the themes they put in there about society romanticizing Michael Myers. They also leave the room open for a copycat killer, for someone to take up the mantle of Michael Myers, even if it's not Michael Myers.
And my feeling on that is, well, it's been 40 years. Like, leave Laurie Strode alone. You know, like, let her live on. Let's not return to Laurie Strode. Other people can have damage done to him. Or I guess maybe she could Terminator the crap out of a bunch of different Michael Myers.
But that's not Halloween, right? I think if we're going to follow any more Strodes, it needs to be the granddaughter.
Yeah, I would be okay with that. But I just feel bad for Laurie Strode.
Yeah, Laurie Strode's seen enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, what's interesting to me is that the granddaughter never puts the knife down, right? Like, she stabs Michael, they watch him in the basement where there's fire and stuff, and then they're running out and they escape. They flag down this truck and they're in the back. And the last thing we see is her hand, the granddaughter's hand, holding the knife. And that's where we freeze frame it in the film.
Yeah. So
that kind of goes, there's a lot of made in the film about, like, you know, what is it like once you do this? How does that feel? What kind of effect does it have on you? Do you get hooked on it or whatever? And like, so what I took away from it is that there's something that like happened with the granddaughter. Like once she did that, like, I don't necessarily know that it's going to be like, oh, now she's going to be the next Mike Myers and she's hooked on killing people. But I just think it's like really significant that she doesn't drop that knife at any point.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was thinking the same thing. It could be hints to her how much she enjoyed all this violence, or it could be hints towards her never letting her guard down and now she has to deal with trauma.
Yeah.
You know, it could be Laurie Strode all over again and it skipped a generation and came for her granddaughter, you know? Who knows? But I like the end for that reason.
The ambiguity?
Yeah, like pretty soon there will be a sequel and it'll kind of ruin that ambiguity. But also it kind of won't, because we'll always know that this was intended to be ambiguous until the sequel.
Sure.
We can just try to remember a time before there was ever a Halloween 2020 or 2021 or whatever the hell year it comes out.
Yeah, that sounds so far away, but it's shit, man. Yeah. It's 2018.
Well, we made it 40 years. Well, we didn't personally, because we're not 40.
No.
But the world made it 40 years before this one. But it also had lots of bad sequels in between now and then.
Yeah. All right, so I think we have a couple of questions from Facebook, unless you guys have anything else before we move into those.
Not I.
Nor me.
All right, so we got 2 questions from Mickey Kiechi. Hopefully that pronunciation's correct.
Thanks,
maybe you should
Mickey.
we've had a couple of questions from him. He should let us know, so I don't have to.
If we're not saying your name right, Mickey, it's time to speak up.
Please let us know. Anyway, so Mickey says on Facebook, he says, spoilers. First of all, thank you, Mickey. He says, it's said several times throughout the movie that Michael can speak, but chooses not to. However, if he ever were going to talk, it would probably be to Laurie. This ultimately doesn't lead anywhere other than the demise of Michael's doctor. It definitely would have been controversial among fans, but the idea is interesting to me, and I was kind of excited about the possibilities. What are your thoughts on it? How would you have felt about Michael talking to Laurie, whether it be one word or an entire conversation?
I don't know. I have honestly, and I'm being perfectly honest here, I have never once considered the possibility of Michael Myers saying a word. Like, it just hasn't occurred to me as up to what he would even possibly say. So everything about that feels wrong to me. And so I would say I never want Michael to speak anything. And if he did, I honestly have no idea what he would say. But I do not want that at all.
Maybe he's just trying to return Laurie Strode's wallet. And he's just be like, here's your wallet. And then he's just
going
walks
about
off.
that the wrong way.
Yeah.
I hope I never lose my wallet to you, Chris. Yeah. So I have two thoughts on why I would never want him to speak, because I'm with you, Mike. I don't think he ever should. One goes back to Charlie Chaplin's The Tramp character, and the reason that Charlie Chaplin retired that character once sound became a thing and he started needing to do sound films. Like, he moved on from the character because he knew that if the Tramp character ever spoke a word, ever talked, ever had a voice, it would lose all the charm. Like, even the past movies would lose their charm once you see the film where the Tramp talks, right? Mm-hmm. And I think 100% that's what happens with Mike Myers. If he says anything. If, like, Mike Myers suddenly has a voice.
Yeah, if he says ow.
Yeah.
It's
ow,
like
huh?
Did you guys ever watch the Tom and Jerry cartoons? There was some where they never talked, and then towards the later ones, they started, like, there's a movie where they talk.
Right.
Yeah, I remember the movie that came out in the 90s where they talk.
Yeah. And I think that does the same thing, where it's just like, it just kind of takes away. I agree. Don't let him talk would be my...
And then if he does say something to Laurie, that suddenly makes Laurie special. And one of the things that works about this movie is that we find out that Laurie isn't special. He's not out for revenge against her. Like,
she's out for revenge against him.
So if he did, I guess that's true. But like, if he did say something to her, in order for it to like not imply some special relationship between the two of them, it would have to be like, oh, hey, it's you.
Right.
Or something like 40 years ago. Remember me?
The one that got away.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, otherwise you put all the significance on her, which the whole film convinces us that Mike's just an evil dude.
Exactly. Okay. So the next question from Mickey says, also this, like Creed in The Force Awakens is sort of a reboot in the guise of a sequel. It tells the same story as the first entry in the franchise and places the original's hero in a role previously played by a now past actor/character. Halloween recontextualizes Laurie as Loomis, just as Creed did with Rocky as Mickey, and The Force Awakens did with Han as Obi-Wan. What do you think of this method of keeping franchises alive? Preferable to a straight remake? Empty? Overly safe for fan service?
So I guess the alternative would be all new characters, or like all new actors, all new characters with like the same story, right? Like,
yeah,
I guess kind of like the Rob Zombie,
or just a straight up remake, exactly like the Rob Zombie one, or any number of remakes.
Well,
yeah, what do you
think starting over sometimes feels crappy, right?
Right.
Like, I kind of like the rollover where it's like, it's all part of the same story and it's kind of a continuation. It feels like you're getting more, or like turning over a new chapter rather than like reading the same book again with like a different polish, like a different cover on it or something. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It feels more respectful. It feels more honest. It feels less cheap.
Yeah. And as long as it's a logical place for those characters to go, like Han Solo to Obi-Wan makes sense. Laurie Strode to Loomis makes sense to me. And oftentimes we replace people in our lives as we get older. We become different things. So it makes logical sense, and actually I think makes the story better, in my opinion. So yeah.
Yeah, and it keeps
Sometimes.
the original ones being valued as opposed to forgotten about.
Right.
Which I'm all about.
That's true, too.
We have one question from Jerry Hart on Facebook, and it says, considering over a dozen people die in this, which death is your favorite? So I think I would say that my favorite death is Captain Friendship Zone, or whatever you called him before. Captain Friend Zone.
Captain Friend Zone.
Yeah. The combination of it being a little bit funny and then also the motion sensors with the lights, I really enjoyed. So what about you, Mike?
I would say my favorite would be after he walks out the front door of the house with the baby in it, and he sees those two people getting in the car, and then he walks up to the front porch and sees that woman on the phone, and the camera stays there on the window, and he walks all the way around to the back, and you can see him through the side windows as he walks around to the back, and then he just pops up in the house. It's like a 90-second shot, and it is everything I look for in a horror movie. Right? It is one solid take. It feels so fast, like how scary and quick it could happen. It happens in real time because it doesn't cut. The idea of someone looking in your window, walking around to the back of your house, walking into the back of your house somewhere, and stabbing you, and then walking out the front door is nuts to me.
Yeah, and I love how the camera holds there, and we can see Michael Myers like in the periphery as he walks around the house. So
yeah,
we can,
you see a shadow on the wall across the alleyway. It's just wonderful. It's just a wonderful, suspenseful, creepy, unsettling shot. And
that
I loved
whole
it.
Take is really great.
I loved it.
What about you, Justin?
Well, I mean, I agree with Mike. That was my favorite. But since you brought it up, I'll bring up another one that I found really intriguing, even though I guess it technically wasn't a kill, but it's when the two people, I guess it's a father and son, pull up on the bus, and the father gets out, and then the son comes after him. But I think right towards the end of that scene, we see like what happened to the father, and like his like face has been like his jaw has been like ripped out of like its place, and like his face is all stretched all weird, and like just imagining what Michael Myers did to him to like put his face in the shape that it's in, like that seems it seems terrible. It's scary.
Just to hop off that real quick, do you guys remember the scene when the podcasters are at the gas station? And it's before Michael gets the coveralls or the mask. There's a scene where like the main guy, the British podcaster dude, is like filling up his gas, and he's looking at a van, like a religious van. And in the background, you totally see Michael just walk into the gas station, and you hear him murder the first guy, like in the background. But the camera's not focused on him at all. And then he goes in there to like, and he's like looking at the guy who has his jaw all messed up at the counter, who's dead. And in the background, while he's looking at that guy, you see Michael murdering another dude in the garage, like in the windows in the background.
Yeah, I really like
so
that.
Cool.
All of that. It was just like how much he was doing in the background, and all the fun they have with like not showing you his face.
Yeah, all the fun.
During all of that.
All they have with like maybe you see him, maybe you don't. It's all so cool. Anyway, so the last question we have is from Jacob on Twitter. It's at Jacob, oh my goodness, 025796665. And he says, loved it. 2 things. I love that Michael is a complete badass and doesn't give 2 shits about the Strode family. Unlike every other sequel, he just wants to kill. And I really liked the Doctor twist because it makes everything that came before it make sense. Well, Jacob, you and I are on the exact same page because that's pretty much what I've been trying to get across this whole review. I like that Michael is back to what I originally saw him as in the first one, which is someone who doesn't care who you are. If you're in his path, he will kill you. And also, I think the Doctor twist also makes everything before it in the movie make more sense and make it better in retrospect, even though the twist itself might be pushing it for some people.
Always agree.
Agreed.
Cool. So
yeah, I have nothing to add. Yeah.
Are we done with Halloween, guys? This has been a long one.
Well, it's only October 22nd.
Yeah, we got like 9 more days.
Oh my god.
9 more days. This is going to be the longest podcast ever.
This is going to be a long episode, guys.
Yeah.
It legit is, actually, all joking aside. So, yeah, and thank you guys for listening to it. Thank you guys so much if you made it all the way.
Yeah. If you agree with our takes, disagree, think we sound foolish, or think we missed something, let us know.
Yeah, send us your thoughts and any further questions you have to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Casual Cinecast.
Join us next week. Our episode will be over Sisters Brothers. As well as, before the end of the month, we will have a Casually Criterion on The Blob, starring Stephen McQueen. I say that because he's credited as Stephen and not Steve in that movie.
Nice.
It wasn't a mistake. I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Nothing you do is ever a mistake, Mike.
I've never made a mistake, Chris.
A reason
Thank you for
why
bringing
you
that
were
up
doing
on
that
the
on
podcast.
purpose. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.